All right, we are back, folks. Man, that was the craziest pay-per-view main event in a while, man. To see Volk get knocked out like that was crazy, man. What a UFC. That was absolutely wild. And this weekend we got UFC Fight Night in Mexico City. If you guys know anything about Mexico City, super high up in elevation. So you got to favor some of the Mexicans who've already fought, in that elevation. That is, it's gonna be actually crazy. It's gonna be crazy. I like this card actually. It's not a pay per view, obviously. It doesn't have the same name value as last week's, obviously, but there's some decent fights on this card. Even Yair and Brian Ortega. That should probably be your main event, but obviously Moreno, former champion, he's going to be taking that spot against Brandon Raw Dog Royval in a rematch. So I'm actually going to post my bets before. So if you guys watched last week's picks, we're about 90% on our picks. And hopefully we can get around, 90% going into this week's UFC fight night. So I'm going to post two of my bets here. I got Moreno and Raul Roses Jr. And I also got a fun parlay with the same thing Moreno, Roses Jr., and Yair Rodriguez. But that Moreno Roses parlay, that'll double your money, and it's a pretty decent parlay. I think Moreno, he's the better fighter of the two. Raw Dog Royval, he's actually a good fighter, but and he was on a nice, little win streak going into the Pantoja fight, but Pantoja just dominated him. And I think Brandon Moreno is gonna be doing the same thing. I think him and Pantoja are around the same level. So if you couldn't deal with Pantoja, I think you're gonna have a hard time dealing with Brandon Moreno, especially in Mexico City. That's a tough fight. Everyone's gonna be cheering for Moreno. Let's see here. Yeah, so Moreno, he did lose a split decision to Pantoja. A lot of people actually thought Moreno won the fight. A lot of people are like, if you want to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but you know, this guy's fought everybody in that division, from the Figueiredo like four times to Kai Car France, Pantojas. He's fought the top guys in that division, and I think he's gonna run through Brandon Royval. I was not impressed with Royval's last performance. He did not look good in that title fight, and I think Brandon Moreno is going to eat him up. Now, this one's a good fight. Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega. This is probably the fight everyone's looking forward to the most. Yair coming off, just a horrible performance. Volkanovski just destroyed him. But before that, he looked really good. Beat Josh Emmett. Brian Ortega, this is the rematch. He injured his arm in the last fight, but I thought Yair was winning the fight up until the shoulder injury. And now you got someone like Brian Ortega. He's taking some time off, over a year off with that shoulder injury. His last fight was the Yair in 2022, so about a year and a half. Yeah, I'll go with Yair Rodriguez on this one. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to decision. I think Yair by decision is actually a pretty decent bet because I don't think that fight goes to the ground. Now, this is crazy. Daniel Zellhuber was such a big favorite over Francisco Prado. Did this fight, is he taking this fight on short notice? I mean, Daniel Zellhuber is pretty good. I realized how good he was when he beat, Groovy Lando Fanata. He does have a loss to Trey Ogden. Not too impressed with that performance, but that was his first fight in the UFC. Prado, on the other hand, this guy hits very hard for that division for lightweight. He sort of reminds me of like a Drew Dober in a way, like an Argentinian Drew Dober. His only loss into the UFC and his career was to Jamie Malarkey. And yeah, I don't know why they're counting out Prado. I think Prado has a chance. I would definitely give the edge to Zellhuber, but Prado's for real, man. He's only 21 years old. You got to realize when he lost his only fight in the UFC, he was, you know, 20, 19 or 20 at the time. This guy's one of the youngest fighters in the UFC. I think he could very well win this fight, man. When you're 21 and you're getting really good really quickly. Um, yeah, I know he's a huge underdog, but he's a live dog in this one. Don't count out Francisco Prado. And speaking about young fighters, here is the youngest fighter on the roster, Raul Rosas Jr., 19 years old. If you're the UFC, you're gonna want to build this kid up, right? I've been telling you guys this. It makes no sense for them to just go in there and destroy this kid's career and put him in there with guys who's gonna knock him out, and then he'll never be the same again. Sort of what they did to Sage Northcutt, and getting knocked out. It's hard to come back after those, man. Look at Volkanovski. So if you're the UFC, you want to um, match him accordingly, so to speak. You want to build this 19-year-old kid up, and I think they're going to do just that in Mexico. They're going to try to build this kid up in Mexico. The UFC's got a new performance institute in Mexico. This makes no sense if they put him up against a guy who's going to just destroy Raul Rosas Jr. So I got to go with Raul Rosas on this one. I was not impressed by Ricky Tercio's last performance, the split decision win over Kevin Anadivad. And, he's also lost to Ayman Zahabi, Faraz Zahabi's little brother. Not impressed by his performances at all. So I'll go with Raul Rosas Jr. all day. I think he's going to crush him, especially in Mexico. Next one I'll touch on. This is Chris Duncan. He's got a pretty good record: 11 wins, 1 loss, and he's a slight underdog going against Emmanuel Torres. So it's not about how good your record is. Sometimes it's about who you've beat. And fighting out of Scotland, I think there's only a few fighters fighting out of Scotland. The other one being Paul Craig. But he does have a split decision win over Omar Morales. That was impressive. He had a fight with Terrence McKinney, which just recently got canceled a few months back, and now he's taking on El Loco Manuel Torres. And Manuel Torres is on a 5-fight win streak, pretty impressive. I would say this fight, I'm gonna take the over in this fight. I think this fight goes to decision, and I think this is gonna be very evenly matched. I do think Manuel Torres should take the victory. I think he's the better striker of the two. If you see here, significant strikes landed per minute, 9.66. That's pretty impressive. That's a lot in 1 minute. Super active. Takedown average, he actually hasn't gone for a takedown, but Chris Duncan does go for takedown. So it'll be surprising to see if Chris Duncan's able to get this fight to the ground. Christian Quinones taking on Hani Barcelos. So Hani Barcelos, man, he's a really good fighter, but he's just fought. They're putting him against, top guys, and he's just been getting destroyed. Put him against Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar destroyed him. Kyler Phillips, who's teammates with, I think it was the Sandman or Sean O'Malley, one of those guys, teammates with them. Can't think of it on top of my head exactly which it was, Corey or one of those guys. But Kyler Phillips, the Matrix, they call him. He's very good. And Hani Barcelos has 1 win in his last 5 fights. So he's 1 win, 4 losses in his last 5 fights. But I think he's gonna deal with Christian Quinones. I think that's a big step down in competition compared to the guys he just fought, from Umar Nurmagomedov's Kyler Phillips to Christian Quinones. That should be easy work for Hani Barcelos. And he just got submitted his last fight by Kung Ho Kang, and now you're gonna fight this crazy Brazilian psycho. He's probably gonna submit Christian Quinones, so I'll go with Hani Barcelos all day on that one. Actually, pretty good bet to put on your parlay. This one I want to touch on. Edgar Chavez. I think he's the biggest favorite on the card, taking on Daniel Lerta, who is, I believe, Charles Oliveira's teammate. And Edgar Chavez, he's coming up. They already fought. It was a premature stoppage, and now this is the rematch. He was actually winning the fight in that fight as well, and yeah, that's going to be an issue, right? I think Daniel Lacerda's got 5 losses in a row, 4 losses in a row. Has never, he has four or 5 fights in the UFC, and he's lost them all. So you got to go with Edgar Chavez, and makes sense why he's such a huge favorite, because Lacerda has not even been able to rack up 1 win in the UFC. So you got to go with Edgar on that one. And the last one I'm going to touch on is this one, the Smile Killer. Perez taking on Claudio Puelles. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. The Frenchman's been on a roll. Other than that loss and that horrible performance to Terrence McKinney where he got choked out, he's got some pretty decent wins, even beating Jamie Malarkey and Jai Herbert. Jai Herbert's very tall for that division. He's the only actually guy to hurt Ilia Topuria, who's now the champion of that division. Did get knocked out viciously after, but he did have Ilia Topuria on skates. And Claudio Puelles, he was a guy who was on a very nice win streak, and then he ran into Dan Hooker, the Hangman. And Dan Hooker absolutely destroyed him, finished him with a body kick. And yeah, this one's going to be tight. I don't think the Smile Killer, the Frenchman, should be minus 210 at all. I don't think so. I do think he probably might edge out the victory. I think this fight goes to decision. I think he probably wins a decision, but the fact that he's minus 210, that is not good odds, because Claudio, take that Hangman fight out, he was on a wicked fight win streak. So I think he had like 5-6 in a row. So this is I'll take that fight to go decision. And then yeah, those are your picks in Mexico City. And if you guys need a place to BetUS, promo code Iceman. Let's stack that money up for these big pay-per-views coming up. The next 2 are massive pay-per-views. So let's build that bankroll up.